Chapter 1. A Picture of Trouble. The small village of Morningshire was peaceful, nestled deep in the English countryside, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, blooming flowers, and the faintest hint of damp earth. It was the sort of place where nothing much ever happened, a village so quiet that even the most scandalous news was enough to send shockwaves through the sleepy streets. But for all its apparent serenity, there was something that always caught Enola Holmes's attention: the sharp eyes of its residents, the occasional glance that held a little too much, the whispers that carried just beneath the surface. And it was this that had brought her here, despite the allure of the vibrant bustle of London, her natural inclination for solving mysteries urging her to investigate what seemed like a simple, dull village. Enola's mother, the enigmatic Eudora Holmes, had sent her here, hoping the change of scenery might do her good, especially after the upheaval of recent events. And although the idea of a peaceful respite wasn't entirely unpleasant, Enola wasn't one to sit idly by. The quiet hum of Morningshire, rather than soothing her, sparked her curiosity. There had to be more to this quaint village than met the eye. It was the appearance of an old photograph that tipped the balance. Enola had been staying in a small cottage on the outskirts of Morningshire, rented by a local widow named Mrs. Brookshire. The woman was kind enough, though Enola had quickly noticed a nervous tension beneath her words. She couldn't quite place it, but it had been there, like the soft hum of a storm before it broke. One morning, as Enola sat at the small kitchen table, sifting through some local papers Mrs. Brookshire had left out for her, a knock at the door broke her concentration. She opened it to find a middle-aged man, his coat slightly damp from the morning fog, standing on the doorstep. "Miss Holmes?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "A package has arrived for you." Enola raised an eyebrow, a faint smile curving at the corner of her lips. She hadn't ordered anything, yet here was this mysterious parcel, as if the universe itself had decided to deliver it into her hands. "Thank you," Enola said, accepting the small, crinkled parcel, no larger than a book. It felt light, yet oddly heavy with expectation. The man nodded, tipping his hat before disappearing down the narrow path leading from her cottage. She closed the door behind her and carefully unwrapped the parcel. Inside was a photograph, a faded black and white image, yellowing at the edges. It depicted a group of people standing together in front of a large, imposing house. Some faces were obscured by shadows, others staring directly into the camera, their expressions frozen in time. But there was one figure that stood out. A young woman, no older than Enola herself, with a striking face, pale and drawn, her dark eyes piercing. She was positioned slightly apart from the others, her posture stiff, as though she were uncomfortable in her own skin. Enola's eyes lingered on the woman's face, and the name seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep in her memory: Evelyn Claremont. A name that belonged to one of Morningshire's wealthier families, though she couldn't recall seeing her in town before. The photograph had to be old, several decades at least, but something about it felt off. A chill ran down her spine as she studied the details: the house behind the group, the suspiciously vacant look in the woman's eyes, and the odd way the others stood in the background, as though they were hiding something. Enola couldn't quite place the feeling, but it gnawed at her. It was as if this photograph wasn't just a memory captured in time, it was a clue, a piece of a puzzle she had yet to solve. That evening, as the soft golden light of dusk bathed the village, Enola couldn't shake the photograph from her mind. She returned to the cottage after a brief walk through the village square, where nothing seemed out of place. But it was in the quiet of the cottage, with the photograph in her hand, that the true nature of the mystery began to settle in her mind. The photograph wasn't simply a family heirloom. It was a cryptic clue wrapped in a story, and Enola wasn't one to leave such things untouched. Her mother had taught her that. Enola Holmes had always believed that mysteries were never truly solved until the heart of them had been uncovered. And though Morning's Hire seemed like the most tranquil of places, Enola was certain that there were secrets buried beneath its peaceful surface. The next morning, Enola set out to gather information, her mind already turning. She made her way to the Claremont estate, a sprawling property situated just outside the village, hidden from view by a veil of tall hedges and thick trees. The Claremont family had long been known in Morning's Hire, and their wealth and influence were undeniable. But the name Evelyn Claremont stuck in her mind, and she needed to know more. The estate was quiet when she arrived, the tall wrought iron gates locked. She hesitated for a moment, then slipped through a gap in the iron fence, her nimble figure easily fitting through the narrow opening. She crept along the edge of the estate, scanning the windows and doors for any sign of movement. It was then that she saw the old gardener, bent low, tending to the flowers near the back of the property. He was an elderly man with graying hair and weathered skin, the kind of person who seemed tied to the land, as though he had been there for decades. "Excuse me," Enola said, approaching him with a purposeful stride. "Could you tell me about the Claremont family?" The gardener looked up, startled, but his features softened when he saw her. "The Claremonts? A fine family, miss. Wealthy, yes. But not without their troubles." Enola's curiosity piqued. "What sort of troubles?" The gardener hesitated, wiping his hands on his trousers before leaning closer. "Well, there was the daughter, Evelyn. Beautiful girl, but always troubled. She was involved in a scandal, I hear. Not that anyone talks about it now. Too long ago, I suppose." Enola's heart skipped a beat. "What scandal?" The gardener paused, looking over his shoulder as if he were searching for something or someone. "Best ask the older folk about that. Not something for a young lady like you to go digging into." Enola's eyes flashed with determination. "I'll be the judge of that." As Enola returned to the cottage, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The photograph, Evelyn's troubled past, and the strange secrecy surrounding the Claremonts, it all pointed to something hidden, something that had been locked away for years. And Enola, ever the curious investigator, was determined to uncover the truth. The mystery of Evelyn Claremont was just beginning, and Enola would not rest until she had solved it. Chapter 2: The Whispered Secrets of Morning's Hire. The morning following her conversation with the gardener, Enola set out with a renewed sense of purpose. The photograph, along with the gardener's cryptic comments, had stirred something within her, something beyond mere curiosity. It wasn't just about Evelyn Claremont anymore. There was a deeper mystery lurking beneath the surface of Morning's Hire, and Enola was determined to uncover it. Her first stop was the village library, a quaint, low building tucked between a bakery and the village post office. The sign outside, faded by years of weather, read Morning's Hire Public Library, but inside, the shelves were well kept and organized, the air thick with the smell of old books. The librarian, a woman named Miss Pemberley, was a slender figure with sharp eyes, perpetually scanning the room as though expecting trouble to break out at any moment. "Good morning, Miss Holmes," Miss Pemberley greeted her as she stepped through the door. Looking for a book on local history, are you? Enola nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. I am, actually. I'm hoping to learn more about the Claremont family. Specifically, about Evelyn Claremont. Miss Pemberley's sharp gaze seemed to sharpen even further, and for a brief moment, Enola thought she saw something flash in the librarian's eyes, something between suspicion and concern. Claremont, you say? Miss Pemberley's voice was soft, her tone carefully neutral. I do have a few books on the Claremonts. Family history, estate records. But not many people ask about them these days. There's not much to say, I suppose. Enola raised an eyebrow. Is that so? I had the impression that they were quite a well-known family around here. Indeed, Miss Pemberley replied, her lips pursed. But like many wealthy families, their history is a bit tangled. You might find what you're looking for in the back room. But be warned, some stories are better left forgotten. With a nod, Enola walked toward the back room, her curiosity piqued. Miss Pemberley's reaction hadn't gone unnoticed. It seemed there was more to the Claremonts than the village was willing to let on. And if there was one thing Enola had learned in her many investigations, it was that the most interesting mysteries often had layers of silence surrounding them. The back room of the library was smaller and dimmer than the main area, the shelves packed with dusty tomes. Enola ran her fingers along the spines of the books, scanning titles until one caught her eye, The Claremont Legacy, A History of Morningshire's Oldest Family. She pulled the book off the shelf and opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed with age, and as she flipped through them, she found a brief history of the Claremont family, wealthy landowners, philanthropists, and well-regarded members of the community. But the further Enola read, the more she sensed something amiss. The entries on Evelyn Claremont were sparse, only mentioning her briefly in relation to her marriage to a man named Theodore Vance, a well-known investor from London. But there was something about the way the passages were worded that gave Enola pause. Evelyn Claremont, known for her beauty and social charm, married Theodore Vance in a grand ceremony at the family estate. However, some speculate that the union was marred by difficulties. Evelyn disappeared from public life shortly after the marriage. Her whereabouts have remained unknown to this day. Enola frowned, her fingers tracing the delicate pages. A young woman, the daughter of a prominent family, disappearing after an apparently perfect marriage? That didn't sit right with her. There had to be more. She turned the page, hoping for more details, but instead, she found only a vague mention of a fire at the Claremont estate some years later, and nothing else regarding Evelyn. She closed the book with a sigh, her mind racing with possibilities. The photograph she had found, the odd expression on Evelyn's face, it was all beginning to make sense. There had to be more to her disappearance than what was written in these pages. Anything of interest? Miss Pemberley's voice broke through Enola's thoughts as she stepped back into the main part of the library. Enola turned to face her, the book still in her hands. I think I need to speak with someone who might know more about Evelyn. A local, perhaps. Someone who was around when she vanished. Miss Pemberley's face remained impassive, but Enola caught the briefest flicker of something, concern, maybe, or fear, in her eyes. Perhaps, Miss Pemberley said carefully. But be cautious, Miss Holmes. Some stories are better left to rest. Enola's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not one to leave things alone when I know there's more to uncover. With that, she left the library, the photograph of Evelyn still burning in her mind. She needed more answers, and the only way to get them was to dig deeper into the town's hidden history. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over Morningshire's cobbled streets, Enola made her way to the village tavern. The Horseshoe and Hound was a familiar haunt for the locals, a place where gossip flowed as freely as the ale. It was there, Enola hoped, she might find someone who knew more about the Claremont family's past. The tavern was bustling with the sound of voices, laughter, and clinking glasses. Enola scanned the room and noticed a group of elderly men gathered around a table by the fire, their conversation low but intense. One of them, an older man with a thick white beard, looked vaguely familiar to Enola. He had a face weathered by time, and his eyes gleamed with a kind of knowing that made Enola instinctively approach him. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, her tone friendly but direct. "I'm Enola Holmes. I'm doing some research into the Claremont family. Do you happen to know anything about Evelyn Claremont?" The man looked up at her, his expression unreadable. He studied her for a moment before replying, his voice gruff. "Evelyn Claremont? Ah, yes. You're not the first to ask about her, young lady. But it's a story that doesn't get told often. Too much pain tied to it. You might want to leave that be." Enola didn't flinch. "I've never been one to back down from a mystery, sir. If you know anything about her, I'd be most grateful to hear it." The man took a long gulp of his drink, his gaze flicking to the others at the table. "What do you want to know, miss? The truth? Or the story they tell in public?" Enola leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "The truth." He looked around once more, then leaned closer to her. She wasn't just some sweet young thing that disappeared into marriage. No, Miss Claremont had a darkness about her. The family tried to keep it quiet, but there were whispers. A fire that claimed much more than the house. There's a reason she's gone from everyone's memory. A reason the family wants her story forgotten. Enola's pulse quickened, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. "What happened to her?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old man looked at her for a moment longer, as if deciding whether to speak, then he stood up slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll find out more than you bargained for if you keep digging, Miss Holmes. Just be careful." And with that, he turned, walking away, leaving Enola standing in the center of the bustling tavern, her mind swirling with possibilities. The mystery of Evelyn Claremont was far from over, and Enola knew she was just beginning to peel back the layers of the past. Chapter 3: The Burning Secret. The shadows of the tavern still clung to Enola as she stepped back into the crisp evening air. The words of the elderly man echoed in her mind, thick with layers of implication. A darkness about her. The family tried to keep it quiet. A fire that claimed much more than the house. Every instinct in Enola urged her to dig deeper, to understand what had truly happened to Evelyn Claremont and why her disappearance had been covered up for so long. The village was quiet now, the shops closed, the streets empty except for the occasional dog padding along the cobblestone roads. The fog was rolling in again, creeping through the alleyways, the air damp and cool. It was the perfect time for secrets to stay hidden. Enola's thoughts turned to the photograph of Evelyn she had found earlier, still tucked safely in her coat pocket. The image had been so much more than just a portrait of a young woman. There was something about the way Evelyn's eyes stared out of the photograph, as though she were trapped, a silent scream hidden beneath her calm expression. The more Enola thought about it, the more she was certain that the photograph held the key to everything. She made her way back to Mrs. Brookshire's cottage, determined to piece together everything she had learned so far. The photograph, the gardener's cryptic warning, the conversation in the tavern, none of it added up yet, but Enola had an unshakable feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering something significant. She needed more answers. More evidence. As she entered the small cottage, she lit a candle and set it on the table, carefully unwrapping the photograph again. Her fingers brushed over the smooth, aged paper, as though touching the past itself. The faces of the people in the image had begun to blur in her memory, the uncertainty of their expressions still haunting her. But one thing stood out, the house in the background. The large, imposing estate in the photograph could only be the Claremont family's manor, the same one Enola had seen from a distance earlier in the day. The photograph had been taken in front of that very house, and Enola could sense that it wasn't just a simple family portrait. It was a moment frozen in time, perhaps a moment before everything changed. Enola took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself. There was only one way forward. She would have to go back to the estate, get closer to the truth, and ask the right questions. She had no intention of leaving Mornings Higher without solving this puzzle. The next morning, the fog still hung low over the village, shrouding everything in a thick, damp blanket. Enola dressed in her most practical attire, prepared for a walk that could take her wherever the trail led. She decided to take the long way through the woods toward the Claremont estate. Though it was a bit of a detour, she wanted to observe the grounds without drawing attention to herself. As she made her way through the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled as she walked, but she didn't look back. She had long since learned that the best way to investigate was to remain unnoticed, and the woods were as good a place as any to observe from the shadows. The Claremont estate loomed ahead, more imposing than it had seemed from a distance. The grand house was still tucked behind its tall gates, its windows dark and lifeless. A tall, wrought iron fence surrounded the property, and the gardens were overgrown, the once meticulously manicured hedges now wild and untamed. It was clear that no one had tended to the estate in years. Enola moved closer, ducking behind a tall, thick hedge to avoid being seen by anyone who might be on the grounds. She crouched down, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of activity. The house seemed to be abandoned, but there was something unsettling about the silence. It felt too complete, too perfect. She spotted a small side door, partially hidden from view by ivy. It was just barely cracked open, and she couldn't help but wonder if it was an invitation, or a mistake. With no one in sight, Enola crept forward, her heart racing, and pushed the door open quietly. It creaked slightly but didn't make enough noise to attract attention. She stepped inside, her footfalls muffled by the dust-covered floor. The air inside the estate was stale, filled with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. As she moved deeper into the house, she could hear the faintest sound, the scrape of something shifting in the darkness. Enola's pulse quickened. The house felt alive with secrets, and every room she entered seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to uncover what had been hidden for so long. The hallway stretched before her, dimly lit by slivers of light filtering in through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. Dust motes swirled in the air, and the faint smell of smoke lingered in the corners of the rooms, as though the house itself had once been a firestorm of activity and passion. She knew that the fire had been the reason Evelyn Claremont's life had been torn apart, but what had really happened? And why did it seem as though no one wanted to speak about it? She moved through the house, touching walls and door frames, hoping to find something that would give her more information. She eventually found her way to the back of the estate, where a grand staircase led up to the second floor. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she climbed, careful not to disturb anything that might give her away. At the top of the stairs, she came to a hallway lined with doors, most of them closed tight. But one door, at the far end of the hallway, was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light spilling out. Enola hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open gently, her eyes scanning the room inside. The room was untouched, well, at least, it appeared to be. It was a large bedroom, its walls lined with faded tapestries and heavy furniture draped in white cloths. The bed was large, its canopy hanging low, the sheets still neat and undisturbed. But what caught Enola's attention was the large portrait hanging above the fireplace. It was a painting of Evelyn Claremont. But unlike the photograph she had seen earlier, this portrait was of Evelyn in full color, her beauty enhanced by the delicate brushstrokes, the glow of her skin illuminated by the soft light that seemed to spill from the painting itself. Evelyn's eyes were soft, serene. But something in the way she was positioned, standing alone, her posture rigid, spoke of something else, something beneath the surface. Enola moved closer to the portrait, her fingers brushing the frame. A small, barely noticeable mark near the bottom of the painting caught her eye. She bent down to take a closer look, and as her fingers traced the edge, she felt the cold metal of something hidden behind the canvas. A small latch. She carefully pulled on it, and the painting shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment in the wall behind it. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal. Enola's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The missing piece. With a sense of triumph, she reached for the journal, knowing that it would hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Evelyn Claremont's disappearance. She opened it carefully, flipping through the yellowed pages, and found the first entry. There is no escape from the fire that haunts me. Every night, it calls my name. Chapter 4, The Flame That Never Died. Enola's fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages of the leather-bound journal. The air in the room felt colder, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the cracked window. The faint sound of wind rustling the trees outside added to the tension in the silence. Her heart raced as she read the first entry aloud, the words heavy with dread. There is no escape from the fire that haunts me. Every night, it calls my name. The words were cryptic, haunting. Enola's gaze flickered to the portrait of Evelyn Claremont hanging above the fireplace. The serene expression on the woman's painted face seemed to mock the turmoil Evelyn had written about. There was a story here, one that had been deliberately buried, hidden behind layers of secrecy and time. With the journal open in her hands, Enola began to read more, the pages falling easily between her fingers as she delved deeper into Evelyn's private world. I do not know how long I have been locked away in this place. They tell me it is for my own good, but I know the truth. The house is not just a prison, it is a tomb. The fire that consumed so much of my family's history was not an accident, and I am not here by chance. They are watching me, waiting for me to slip. Enola paused, her breath catching in her throat. The mention of a fire that had been no accident sent a chill down her spine. Evelyn's cryptic words about being watched added another layer of mystery. What exactly had happened that night? And who was they? Enola's mind raced as she turned the next page, her eyes scanning the journal's fragile pages for more answers. The fire did not destroy all of us. Some of us survived. But we are not who we were before. I see it in the eyes of the servants, the whispers behind closed doors. There is something darker than the smoke that haunts this house. They know what happened, and I fear they will not stop until the truth is buried forever. I must leave. But how can I escape when the fire will never leave me? The words hit Enola like a punch to the gut. Evelyn hadn't just been trapped by the fire. She had been trapped by something far worse: secrets, fear, and perhaps the very people she trusted. The fire had not been a natural disaster, it had been something intentional. And Evelyn had been running from it, even as it consumed her life. Enola shut the journal for a moment, her mind whirling with questions. She could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest. Whoever had caused the fire, and whoever was still hiding the truth, had not only destroyed a house, they had destroyed a life. Enola's hand instinctively reached for the photograph of Evelyn, now safely tucked inside her coat. She unfolded it again, comparing the woman in the photo with the person she had read about in the journal. The same face, beautiful, but haunted. A woman trapped by her own history, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. This wasn't the image of a woman who had married into wealth. This was the face of someone who had been fighting for survival. As she pondered the implications of what she had just uncovered, the sound of footsteps behind her broke the stillness. Enola quickly tucked the journal under her arm, turning to face the doorway. Mrs. Brookshire stood there, a concerned expression on her face. The older woman had been quiet since Enola's arrival, but now her eyes seemed to be filled with an unspoken urgency. "Miss Holmes, I thought I might find you here," Mrs. Brookshire said, her voice shaky. "I have to warn you, there are things in this village that are best left alone. Especially when it comes to the Claremonts." Enola straightened, her gaze unwavering. "What do you know about them, Mrs. Brookshire? What happened to Evelyn Claremont?" Mrs. Brookshire took a hesitant step forward, her wrinkled hands clasped tightly together. "I shouldn't be telling you this, Miss Holmes, but I know you won't stop until you find the truth. Evelyn Claremont wasn't just a troubled young woman, she was a symbol. A symbol of everything that went wrong at that estate. And the fire, it wasn't an accident. No. It was something more. Something deliberate." Enola's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't interrupt. She had suspected as much, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. Mrs. Brookshire continued, her voice low and trembling. "Evelyn's father, Lord Claremont, was a proud man, proud of his wealth, his legacy. But there were debts, Miss Holmes, debts that weren't just financial. The family was tangled up in dark dealings. You see, the fire, it wasn't just about destroying the house. It was about destroying the Claremont family's secrets. And Evelyn was the key to it all." Enola stepped closer, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, Mrs. Brookshire? What secrets?" Mrs. Brookshire's face paled, and she glanced nervously toward the door as if expecting someone to enter at any moment. She lowered her voice even further. There were people, dangerous people, who wanted something that belonged to the Claremonts. They thought the fire would wipe everything out, but Evelyn, she was involved in something. She tried to stop it. Tried to expose it. That's why they locked her away. That's why she disappeared. Enola's pulse quickened. Who are these people? What did they want from the Claremonts? But Mrs. Brookshire shook her head, a pained expression on her face. I can't say, Miss Holmes. I'm afraid. I'm afraid I don't know the full story. But what I do know is that Evelyn didn't just vanish. She was forced to disappear. And now, I fear someone is trying to finish what was started all those years ago. Enola's mind was a whirl of thoughts and suspicions. The fire had been no accident. And Evelyn had been a witness to something dark and dangerous. But what was the secret? What had Evelyn been trying to expose? Do you have any idea where Evelyn went? Enola asked urgently. Mrs. Brookshire shook her head, her eyes downcast. I wish I could help you, Miss Holmes. But I don't know. All I know is that Evelyn is gone. And the Claremont estate? It's a place that holds nothing but regret. Enola stood still, the weight of the mystery pressing down on her. She had come to Morning's Hire seeking a quiet rest, but instead, she had found herself on the brink of uncovering a long-buried truth, one that could shake the foundations of the village and the powerful family that had once ruled it. The fire, Evelyn's disappearance, the Claremont's debts, everything was connected. But how? Enola turned to Mrs. Brookshire, her resolve strengthening. I won't stop until I have the full truth, Mrs. Brookshire. I'll find out what happened to Evelyn Claremont, and what happened to the Claremont estate. Mrs. Brookshire's face softened with a mixture of admiration and concern. Be careful, Miss Holmes. There are some things that are better left undisturbed. The past has a way of dragging you down with it. Enola gave her a firm nod, her eyes filled with determination. I won't be stopped. I'll find the truth, no matter what it takes. As she left the cottage and stepped into the foggy morning, Enola knew one thing for certain: the fire was not the end of the Claremont story. It was only the beginning. Chapter 5: The Ashes of Truth. The fog seemed to grow thicker as Enola stepped away from Mrs. Brookshire's cottage, the heavy silence of the village pressing down on her. The old woman's words still echoed in her mind, warning her of the dangers that lay ahead. But Enola couldn't turn back now. Evelyn Claremont's disappearance was no accident, and the fire that had ravaged the estate years ago was far from a simple tragedy. It was a carefully crafted cover-up, and Enola was determined to expose it. As she walked through the village, her mind raced, turning over the fragmented pieces of the mystery. The photograph, the journal, the hushed conversations, all pointed to something much larger than a simple family tragedy. The Claremonts weren't just wealthy landowners, they were involved in something darker, something dangerous. The next logical step, Enola realized, was to visit the Claremont estate itself. She had already been there once, but she needed to go back, this time, with a sharper eye. She had no doubt that the estate held more secrets than anyone was willing to admit. When she reached the estate, the gates loomed in front of her, taller and more imposing than she remembered. The iron fence was weathered, rusted in places, but it still seemed to stand strong, as if refusing to yield to time. Enola's eyes flicked up to the mansion in the distance, half hidden behind the overgrown trees and thick vines. The house stood there like a silent sentinel, its windows dark and lifeless. Enola hesitated for a moment, but her determination quickly overpowered any doubt. She would not leave Morning's Hire without the truth. She squeezed through a gap in the iron gate, just as she had the day before, and moved toward the side of the property. The garden, once a beautiful display of manicured hedges and vibrant flowers, was now wild and overgrown. Weeds and vines twisted around the stone pathways, choking the life from the ground. The house behind her seemed to loom larger, and the air felt heavier, as if the weight of the past pressed down on everything it touched. She made her way to the side door again, the same one she had noticed the day before. This time, however, she wasn't so cautious. She pushed the door open with more confidence, her heart pounding in her chest. The door creaked as it swung inward, and Enola quickly slipped inside, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. The air inside was musty, and the scent of decay seemed to linger in the corners of every room. The once grand house was now a shadow of its former self, its beauty faded by years of neglect. Enola made her way deeper into the house, moving silently, her eyes sharp and alert for anything that could offer more answers. As she passed through a hallway lined with faded portraits, she couldn't help but feel a strange chill crawl up her spine. The portraits of the Claremont family stared down at her, their expressions as cold and distant as the house itself. But it was the painting at the far end of the hall that caught her attention, a portrait of Lord and Lady Claremont, standing proudly together, their faces painted with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Enola's gaze lingered on the painting for a moment before she moved on. The room she was heading toward was at the end of the hall, and she could feel an inexplicable pull to it, as though the house itself was guiding her. When she reached the door, she found it ajar, just like the last time. The room was dim, the light coming through the cracked windows casting long shadows on the walls. It was a library of sorts, filled with bookshelves that reached up to the high ceiling. The room had a musty, neglected smell, and the dust that had settled on the furniture told Enola that no one had been here in a long while. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the shelves for anything that might be useful. The books were old, their spines worn and brittle, but there was a sense of history here, real history, not the carefully constructed image the Claremonts had tried to maintain. She moved to one of the shelves, her fingers trailing over the spines, until something caught her eye. It was a small leather-bound book, tucked away between two larger volumes. Enola pulled it out, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. The cover was plain, devoid of any title or marking, but it was clearly well-loved, its edges softened by years of use. She opened the book carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through the pages. It appeared to be a journal, perhaps a personal account written by one of the Claremont family members. As she scanned the pages, her eyes narrowed. "The fire is coming. I can feel it in my bones. They say it will destroy us, but it is already here. We have made deals that cannot be undone. Aunt Evelyn will not stop. She knows too much. The secrets she seeks will be her undoing, and we will be caught in the flames together." The journal entry sent a jolt through Enola's chest. The fire, the same fire that had destroyed so much of the Claremont estate, was not a random event. It had been planned. And Evelyn had been at the center of it. She had uncovered something, a secret so dangerous that it had cost her everything. Enola's eyes raced through the rest of the journal, desperate to understand what had happened. But the rest of the pages were filled with the same cryptic, fragmented entries. It was clear that whoever had written this journal had been terrified, trapped in a web of secrets that they couldn't escape. As Enola read, she realized something else. This journal, like the photograph, had been hidden. It had been left behind deliberately, as if the writer had known that someone like her, would come looking for the truth. But the question remained, what had Evelyn uncovered? What secret had the Claremont family been hiding that was so dangerous? And who was responsible for the fire that had consumed everything? Enola closed the book, her mind racing with the implications. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there was still so much left unanswered. She had no intention of leaving the estate without finding out everything she could. The fire, Evelyn's disappearance, it was all connected. As she turned to leave the library, Enola heard a sound, soft, but unmistakable. Footsteps. Someone was in the house. Chapter 6, A Silent Pursuit. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Enola froze. She wasn't sure if the person was aware of her presence, but instinct told her to move quickly and quietly. Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around the room. The shadows seemed to deepen, and the dust in the air hung like a blanket, thick and stifling. She had only moments to act. Enola darted toward a narrow doorway at the far end of the library. Her mind raced, calculating the quickest route out of the room. She could hear the person moving closer, slow, deliberate steps. Whoever they were, they weren't rushing. That in itself was ominous. It was as if they were intentionally drawing out the moment, savoring the knowledge that someone was trespassing on their territory. Enola had no intention of being caught, especially not now, when she was so close to the truth. She ducked into the hallway, keeping to the edges, her footsteps soundless on the old wooden floor. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath as the footsteps grew nearer. The library door creaked open, and a shadow fell across the dim light that filtered through the cracks in the old estate. Enola dared not move, not even to breathe too loudly. She could feel the presence in the room as if the stranger were scanning the very air around them, sensing her proximity. It was as if they knew someone was there, but they weren't sure who. She peered cautiously around the corner. The figure that stood in the doorway was tall, cloaked in a dark overcoat, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Enola couldn't tell if they were male or female, but there was something about the way they moved, something almost familiar. The air seemed to crackle with the weight of their presence. A low voice broke the silence. "I know you're here," it said, the tone deep and steady, as if the person had been waiting for this moment. "You've been digging too deep." Enola's pulse quickened, but she refused to let fear take hold. She wasn't about to back down now. She had come too far. The figure stepped forward, and Enola quickly ducked behind a tall bookshelf, her heart hammering in her chest. She could hear the soft rustle of their clothing as they moved further into the room, their steps echoing in the silence. "Who are you?" Enola asked, her voice firm despite the fear that crept into her chest. "What do you want?" The figure stopped, and for a moment, the room was still. Then the voice spoke again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. You've been asking too many questions, Miss Holmes. And I've been keeping track of your progress. The Claremont family's secrets are not yours to uncover. Some things are better left hidden. Enola's eyes narrowed, a rush of adrenaline pushing her forward. She stepped out from behind the bookshelf, now standing tall and confident, despite the uncertainty in her chest. I think you've misunderstood, sir, she said, her voice cool and controlled. I'm not here to uncover the family's secrets. I'm here to uncover the truth. There's a difference. For a moment, there was silence. The figure didn't move, but Enola could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't know who this person was, but she had no doubt that they were connected to the fire, to Evelyn's disappearance, and to the Claremont family's hidden past. The figure finally spoke, their voice dark and laced with something dangerously close to threat. You think you can outsmart me, Miss Holmes? You think you can uncover what's been buried for so long? Enola took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. I don't need to outsmart anyone. I simply need to find the truth. The figure moved closer, a slow and deliberate step. Enola's instincts screamed at her to retreat, but she stood her ground. Whoever this person was, they weren't here by accident. They were part of the puzzle, and Enola was determined to uncover the pieces. You're meddling in things far beyond your understanding, the figure said, their voice almost gentle, but cold. Evelyn Claremont's fate was sealed long ago. You cannot change what's been set in motion. And you certainly cannot undo what was done. Enola's breath hitched, but she refused to show fear. You're wrong. If you think I'll stop now, you don't know me at all. The figure stopped just a few feet away from her, their shadow falling across her path. Then you will regret it, Miss Holmes. There are forces at play here that even you cannot control. Enola's eyes narrowed. The figure's words were cryptic, and the threat was clear. Whoever they were trying to intimidate her, to make her doubt her course. But Enola had never been one to back down. She had come too far, and there was no turning back now. You're hiding something, Enola said, her voice hardening. And I will find out what it is. The figure laughed softly, a sound that was devoid of humor. We'll see how long your resolve lasts, Miss Holmes. And with that, the figure turned and vanished down the hallway, their footsteps fading into the distance. Enola stood there for a moment, heart pounding, her mind racing. Whoever they were clearly connected to the mystery she was trying to unravel. But what were they hiding? And why were they so desperate to keep her from the truth? She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to scare her away from a case, and it wouldn't be the last. The clues were there, she just had to keep looking. She wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how mysterious or threatening, stop her from uncovering the truth. Enola quickly left the estate, her mind whirring with new questions. The figure in the dark coat was no ordinary person. They knew too much, and that meant they were deeply involved in whatever had happened to Evelyn. But who were they? And what had they meant by forces beyond her understanding? As she made her way back to the cottage, Enola's determination burned brighter than ever. The fire that had destroyed so much, the secrets that had been buried for so long, were not going to remain hidden for much longer. And Enola was going to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. Chapter 7: The Hidden Flame. Enola couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The footsteps she'd heard earlier, the mysterious figure in the Claremont estate, everything seemed to be connected, and yet, the more she uncovered, the more questions arose. What was so dangerous about Evelyn's disappearance that someone would go to such lengths to keep her from finding out the truth? As Enola returned to Mrs. Brookshire's cottage, the evening fog clung to the air, thick and heavy. The village, so quiet in the daytime, seemed to hold its breath under the weight of the night. Enola could feel the shift in the atmosphere, as if something was about to break wide open, and she would be right at the center of it. When she entered the cottage, Mrs. Brookshire was in the kitchen, her back turned as she hummed softly to herself, stirring a pot of soup on the stove. Enola closed the door quietly behind her, making her way into the room. "Everything all right, Miss Holmes?" Mrs. Brookshire asked without turning around, her voice tinged with a gentle concern. Enola hesitated for only a moment, weighing her words. Mrs. Brookshire had been kind to her, but there was something unsettling in the way she spoke, like she knew more than she let on. Maybe it was time to push a little harder. "I've been to the Claremont estate," Enola said, her voice casual, but her eyes sharp. "I've found more than I expected." Mrs. Brookshire stiffened slightly, but it was the only sign of discomfort she gave. "You shouldn't be going to places like that, Miss Holmes. The past is best left where it belongs." Enola studied her closely, the weight of the older woman's words settling heavily in the room. There was something guarded about Mrs. Brookshire's tone, something that hinted she knew more about the Claremonts than she was willing to reveal. "I understand the past is painful," Enola replied, "but I believe there's something important I'm missing. I need to understand what happened to Evelyn Claremont. What happened to the fire?" The words lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. Mrs. Brookshire's hand paused over the spoon she was stirring with, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, Mrs. Brookshire set the spoon down with a soft clink. "You should leave it, Miss Holmes. The fire that destroyed the Claremonts, it wasn't just about the estate. It was about what it covered up. You're stirring up things that were meant to stay buried. If you keep digging, you might find yourself caught in a fire you can't escape." Enola's eyes narrowed. "You know something. I can see it in your eyes. The Claremonts. Evelyn, there's more to the story than just a fire." Mrs. Brookshire sighed deeply, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on her. She walked over to the window, staring out into the darkening evening, her face drawn. "I've lived in this village my whole life, Miss Holmes. I've seen things that no one should have to see. Evelyn was no innocent girl. She was part of something dark, something that no one wanted to talk about, even after it all ended. But the fire wasn't the end, not really. It was just the beginning of something far worse." Enola's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What happened to Evelyn? What was she involved in?" Mrs. Brookshire turned slowly, her eyes filled with the kind of regret that could only come from knowing the truth but being too afraid to speak it. "Evelyn, she was the key to everything, Miss Holmes. She had stumbled onto something her father, Lord Claremont, had been hiding for years. There were people involved in the Claremont estate's affairs, powerful people with dark dealings. And Evelyn was starting to uncover it. That's when the fire started. But it wasn't just the estate that was burned down, It was her life. And the lives of others too. Enola's thoughts raced. What do you mean by the lives of others? Who else was involved? Mrs. Brookshire hesitated before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. There were disappearances, Miss Holmes. Not just Evelyn. There were others who knew too much, who got too close. Some of them were connected to Lord Claremont's business dealings, others were just unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Enola felt the weight of her words sink into her chest. The fire wasn't just to destroy the Claremont estate. It was to destroy the evidence. To silence Evelyn. Mrs. Brookshire nodded gravely. And they did. After the fire, Evelyn vanished without a trace. Some say she died in the flames, others say she escaped, but no one knows for sure. But the people who were behind the fire, they made sure no one would ever ask those questions again. Enola's mind was reeling, but she was determined not to let the details slip away. Who were these people, Mrs. Brookshire? Who could want to destroy so much just to keep their secrets hidden? Mrs. Brookshire shook her head, her expression becoming distant. I can't tell you that, Miss Holmes. You're too young, too inexperienced. There are things, people, who will stop at nothing to protect their power. The Claremonts weren't just part of a wealthy family, they were part of something much larger. And now, someone is trying to finish what was started all those years ago. Enola took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. I've come this far. I won't stop now. Mrs. Brookshire's voice trembled slightly as she spoke one last time. Be careful, Miss Holmes. Some fires should remain extinguished. But I can see it in your eyes, you'll never let this go, will you? Enola didn't answer immediately. She knew the risks, and she knew the dangers. But something inside her wouldn't allow her to walk away, not when the truth was so close. The Claremont's dark secrets, Evelyn's disappearance, the fire, everything was connected, and Enola couldn't stop until she uncovered every last piece of the puzzle. Thank you, Mrs. Brookshire, Enola said, her voice steady. I'll take care. Mrs. Brookshire looked at her one last time, her expression softening. God help you, Miss Holmes. The next morning, Enola stood before the Claremont estate once more. The mansion loomed like a dark sentinel, its broken windows staring out into the foggy landscape. The air was thick with anticipation as Enola stared up at the house, her thoughts racing. She had uncovered so much, but there was still more to learn, more to expose. And she was going to do it, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, she stepped toward the gate, her determination unwavering. Chapter 8, The Final Flame. The fog had settled thickly over Morningshire, shrouding the town in a silent, eerie blanket. As Enola stood before the imposing gates of the Claremont estate, her heart raced with anticipation. She had learned much already, enough to know that the mystery of Evelyn Claremont's disappearance wasn't just a tragic incident but a well-guarded secret, wrapped in lies and danger. Whoever had tried to keep her from the truth had succeeded for years. But now, with the journal, the photograph, and Mrs. Brookshire's reluctant revelations, Enola was closer than ever to uncovering the final pieces of the puzzle. But she knew she had to be careful. The people behind the fire, the ones who had erased the truth about Evelyn, were still out there. And now, they had taken notice of her. She could feel their presence, the weight of their threat hanging in the air. But Enola wasn't one to be intimidated. She had a purpose now, and nothing would stop her from seeing it through. The estate stood in front of her like a dark, silent sentinel. The once grand house now seemed like a hollow shell of its former self, its windows dark, its once beautiful gardens choked with weeds. Enola hesitated only for a moment before pushing open the wrought iron gate and stepping onto the overgrown path. Every step she took seemed to echo louder than the last, but she pressed on, her resolve hardening with each passing second. As she made her way up the crumbling stone steps, her mind flashed back to the conversation with Mrs. Brookshire. The fire hadn't been just a tragedy. It had been an attempt to bury a truth too dangerous to be exposed. And Evelyn Claremont had known it. Had she uncovered the entire story before her death, or had she been silenced before she could finish her investigation? Enola could feel the weight of that question pressing down on her as she reached the large wooden door of the mansion. It was cracked slightly open, as if waiting for her, and her instincts told her that it wasn't an invitation, it was a challenge. Someone had left it ajar, and they were waiting for her to step inside. Taking a deep breath, Enola pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The air inside was thick with dust, as if the house hadn't been disturbed in years. The faint smell of smoke still lingered in the corners, remnants of the fire that had once destroyed so much. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she moved carefully into the grand foyer. A large chandelier hung from the ceiling, now covered in cobwebs, and the walls were lined with faded tapestries and portraits of the Claremont family. The house, though abandoned, still felt alive with history, as though the walls themselves held the secrets of generations. Enola had always believed that history had a way of revealing itself, if one knew where to look. And right now, she was determined to find where the Claremonts had hidden their truth. She walked down the long hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The silence around her was oppressive, almost suffocating. The faintest sound, perhaps a creak or the flutter of a curtain, sent her heart into overdrive. But she stayed focused, following the pull of instinct that had guided her so far. Enola passed through several rooms, each one filled with the same sense of quiet neglect. But then, as she turned a corner, she stopped dead in her tracks. At the far end of the hallway was a door, slightly ajar, but different from the others. This one had an old, brass key dangling from the lock. Enola's heart skipped a beat. She had seen that key before. It had been in the portrait she had discovered at the estate, the key to the hidden compartment behind the painting. It was a symbol, a clue that someone had left for her. Taking a steadying breath, she approached the door. She didn't hesitate. The key fit perfectly, turning smoothly in the lock as she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was smaller than she had expected, dimly lit by the weak afternoon light that filtered through the dusty window. The furniture was covered in white sheets, as though the room had been abandoned for years. But at the far end of the room, against the wall, was something that caught Enola's eye. A desk. She crossed the room quickly, her mind racing with the possibilities. The desk was old, its wood darkened with age, but the drawers were still intact, the handles worn from use. She opened the top drawer first, her fingers brushing against old papers, faded letters, and photographs. As she sifted through the items, one photograph caught her attention. It was a photo of Evelyn, but this time, she was standing in front of a different house, a smaller, more secluded one. There were other people in the photo too, but their faces were blurred, their identities obscured by shadows. The look on Evelyn's face was different from the portrait Enola had seen before. It was a look of defiance, of determination. And then Enola saw it, written in the corner of the photograph in Evelyn's delicate handwriting. "The truth lies beneath the ashes." A chill ran down Enola's spine. Beneath the ashes. The fire. Was Evelyn suggesting that the truth about her family's dark secrets was buried in the very place that had been destroyed by the flames? Enola's breath caught in her throat. She had been on the right path all along, and now it was time to dig deeper into the heart of the mystery. She quickly moved to the next drawer, pulling it open with urgency. This time, the drawer was filled with old papers, contracts, ledgers, and legal documents that were so meticulously organized, it was almost as if someone had been keeping track of everything. Enola scanned through them, her eyes darting back and forth, until one document caught her attention. It was an old, worn ledger, with several names listed in neat columns. At the very bottom of the list was a name that stood out: Theodore Vance. Enola's pulse quickened. The name was familiar. Theodore Vance had been Evelyn's husband, but his involvement with the Claremonts went deeper than she had realized. The ledger seemed to indicate a financial agreement, one that linked the Vance family to the Claremonts in ways that weren't immediately clear. It was all tied to a large sum of money that seemed to have disappeared after the fire. Enola sat down at the desk, her mind racing as she pieced the information together. Theodore Vance, Evelyn's mysterious husband, had been involved in some sort of deal with the Claremonts, something that had gone terribly wrong. And when Evelyn had uncovered it, she had tried to expose the truth. But they had stopped her before she could. Suddenly, Enola's thoughts were interrupted by a sound from behind her, footsteps, light but unmistakable. Someone was in the house. Enola's breath caught in her throat, and she quickly shoved the ledger back into the drawer, making sure it was hidden. She stood up, her heart racing as she glanced around the room. There was no time to escape now, no time to run. She had to act quickly, to confront the person who was stalking the halls of the Claremont estate. The door to the room creaked open, and a shadow fell across the threshold. Enola didn't flinch. She was ready. Chapter 9, A Dangerous Game. Enola stood perfectly still, her heart thudding in her chest as the door creaked open, the sound almost deafening in the silence. She had no idea who was on the other side of the door, but she was certain they weren't here by accident. Her instincts told her that whoever had entered the room was part of the dangerous web she was unraveling, and they weren't happy that she had come this far. The figure in the doorway was cloaked in shadows, but Enola could make out the outline of a tall, slender figure. The person stepped into the room, their presence suffocating, filling the small space with a sense of tension. Their footsteps were soft, deliberate, as if they were weighing each step before making it. Enola didn't move. She couldn't afford to make a sound, to give away her position. Her mind raced, her body frozen in place as she prepared herself for whatever confrontation lay ahead. She knew she had to act quickly, no matter who this person was. She couldn't let them stop her now. Then, the voice came, a low, almost bored tone that sent a shiver down her spine. "I thought I'd find you here." Enola's pulse quickened, but she refused to show any fear. She'd encountered dangerous people before, and this time would be no different. She met the stranger's gaze without hesitation, her own eyes sharp, defiant. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady. The figure's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "You're sharper than I expected. But then again, you always were, weren't you, Miss Holmes?" Enola froze. The voice, though cold and unfamiliar, seemed to stir something deep within her, something she couldn't quite place. It was as if she'd heard it before, but at the edges of her memory, a faint echo she couldn't quite reach. "Who are you?" she repeated, her voice firmer now. The stranger stepped fully into the room, allowing a bit of light to fall across their face. Enola's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sharp features and cold eyes. She had seen this person before, but where? Her mind raced. "Not who you were expecting, I gather," the stranger continued, their voice dripping with an unsettling calm. "But I'm afraid you've made a serious mistake by digging into the past, Miss Holmes. Some things were meant to stay buried." Enola didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you." The stranger's eyes darkened. "You should be." There was a moment of silence as the two of them stood there, locked in a tense standoff. Enola's mind was spinning, but she kept her focus. Whoever this person was, they were part of the puzzle she had been piecing together for days. And they weren't going to intimidate her. "I'm not here to play games," Enola said, her voice sharp. "I'm here to uncover the truth. The Claremont fire, Evelyn's disappearance, you're involved in this, and I'm going to find out how." The stranger let out a soft chuckle, shaking their head as if she were an amusing distraction. "You think you've uncovered something important, but you're just scratching the surface, Miss Holmes. The truth is far more complicated than you realize. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Enola stood her ground, refusing to back down. "I'll find out what happened to Evelyn. I won't stop until I do." The stranger's gaze hardened, their expression turning cold and menacing. "You're far too clever for your own good, Enola Holmes. But you don't understand what you're dealing with. You've already uncovered things that you shouldn't have, and now you're in too deep." Enola's mind raced, trying to make sense of the clues. The name, how did they know her name? She had been cautious, never revealing too much to anyone in the village. And yet, this person seemed to know exactly who she was and what she was after. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Enola shot back. "And I'm not afraid of you." The stranger took a step closer, their presence looming over her like a storm ready to break. "You should be," they said, their voice a low whisper. "Because if you keep digging, you'll find that there are forces out there that will stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. Even if it means destroying you." Enola didn't flinch. She had heard threats before, this one was no different. But the underlying fear in the stranger's words told her one thing: she was getting closer. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous this game became. And the stakes were higher than she had realized. "Who are you working for?" Enola asked, her voice low, her eyes narrowing. "Who is behind all of this?" The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, they took a step back, their gaze scanning the room, almost as if they were weighing her words, deciding whether to reveal more. Finally, they spoke, their voice quiet but edged with a dark certainty. "You'll find out soon enough," they said. "But by then, it will be too late. You won't be able to stop what's coming." Enola's breath caught in her throat. Whatever they were hiding, whatever they were afraid of her discovering, it was something so big, so dangerous, that it had already cost them everything. And they weren't about to let her continue her investigation unchallenged. Without warning, the stranger turned and moved toward the door, their shadow falling across the room. But just before they disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, they paused, turning to face Enola one last time. "I would advise you to stop," they said, their voice carrying an icy finality. "Before you find yourself trapped in a fire you can't escape." The door slammed shut behind them, and Enola was left standing alone in the dimly lit room. Her heart raced as the weight of their words sank in. The fire, the secrets, the dangers, it was all part of a larger game, one that she was now a part of whether she liked it or not. But Enola was no stranger to danger. She had always known that the truth came with a cost. And now, more than ever, she was determined to pay whatever price was necessary to uncover the secrets that the Claremonts had buried for so long. She turned back toward the desk, her resolve stronger than ever. The final pieces were falling into place. And she would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 10: The Heart of the Fire. The door slammed shut behind her, and Enola was left in the silence of the Claremont estate, the air still thick with the weight of the stranger's warning. She stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing as she processed the encounter. The mysterious figure had made it clear that they were trying to stop her, but why? What was so dangerous about the truth she was uncovering? What did the Claremonts, what did Evelyn, know that had to remain hidden? As she took a deep breath, Enola's resolve solidified. No threat, no matter how intimidating, would stop her from getting to the heart of the mystery. The pieces were coming together, and there was only one way forward. She needed to uncover the truth about the fire, the secrets of the Claremont family, and Evelyn's involvement. Enola turned back to the desk, her fingers itching to continue her search. The ledger, the journal, and the photograph all pointed to a story buried deep within the ashes of the fire, and she was determined to find it. There were more clues here, she was certain of it. More pieces of the puzzle. Her eyes fell to the old photograph of Evelyn, the one that had caught her attention earlier. The photograph of Evelyn standing in front of the other house, the smaller one that she had never seen before. There had to be more to it, something that connected Evelyn to whatever dark secrets the Claremonts had been hiding. Enola grabbed the photograph, carefully examining it once more. She ran her fingers over the edges, tracing the faint, faded writing in the corner of the photo. "The truth lies beneath the ashes." Beneath the ashes. She could almost hear Evelyn's voice in her mind, desperate, trying to tell her something. Was there something Evelyn had found in that house? Something that could expose the truth? As she studied the photo, Enola's gaze was drawn to the background. The house in the photograph was different from the Claremont estate. It was smaller, older, and somewhat worn down. The garden appeared wild, unkempt, as if it had been neglected for years. And the shadows, there was something off about the shadows, something that made the entire scene feel wrong, unnatural. Her thoughts raced as she examined the photograph. Evelyn had been standing there, on the doorstep of this forgotten house, the expression on her face one of grim determination. Had she been investigating it? Had she found something hidden there, something the Claremonts were desperate to protect? The answer seemed clear: the house was significant. Evelyn had gone there for a reason, and whatever she had discovered was something too dangerous to let see the light of day. Without wasting any more time, Enola grabbed her coat and headed for the door. She wasn't sure where the house was, but if Evelyn had known about it, it couldn't be too far from the estate. And it was the next step in her investigation. She needed to find out what Evelyn had uncovered, and she needed to do it before whoever had threatened her earlier could find her first. The streets of Morningshire were eerily quiet as she made her way through the village, the fog thickening around her. She kept her head down, blending into the shadows, though she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she passed a house, a tree, or a narrow alley, she half expected to see someone following her. The figure from the estate was still fresh in her mind, and she knew that whoever they weren't done with her yet. But she couldn't afford to let fear stop her. The truth was just within reach, and nothing would make her stop now. After what felt like hours of walking, Enola finally spotted the house in the distance, half hidden behind a thicket of trees. It was as small and dilapidated as it had appeared in the photograph, its once beautiful facade now weathered by years of neglect. The garden was overgrown with weeds, and the windows were dark, their panes cracked and dusty. This was it. Evelyn had come here, and now Enola was standing on the threshold of the secrets that had been hidden for so long. Taking a deep breath, Enola pushed open the gate and walked up the cracked stone path. The door to the house was ajar, just like the one at the Claremont estate. She hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open, the wood groaning in protest. The interior of the house was dim and musty, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dampness. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that filtered through the broken windows, and Enola could almost feel the weight of the years that had passed since anyone had set foot in this place. She stepped carefully inside, her eyes scanning the room. It was small, but the furniture was still intact, covered in white sheets to protect it from the dust. The room had the same air of abandonment as the rest of the house, but there was something else, something that made Enola's pulse quicken. A large, wooden chest sat in the corner of the room, its surface scratched and worn. It was heavy, ancient, and had a lock on it. Enola's heart skipped a beat. This chest had to hold something important, something Evelyn had discovered before she disappeared. With a steady hand, Enola walked over to the chest and examined the lock. It was old, but the keyhole was intact. She pulled out the small key from her pocket, the same one she had found behind the painting in the Claremont estate. She had known it would come in handy. The key slid into the lock with ease, and Enola turned it. The chest creaked open. Inside, she found a collection of papers, documents, ledgers, and letters, most of them yellowed with age. But one item caught her attention more than the rest, a small, delicate box, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. It was clearly old, but its craftsmanship was flawless. She gently lifted the box out of the chest, her fingers trembling as she undid the clasp. Inside, there was a single item, a small, silver locket. The locket was inscribed with the initials E.C. Evelyn Claremont. Enola's fingers brushed over it, and as she opened it, she found a hidden compartment inside, containing a small piece of paper folded neatly within. She unfolded the paper, her breath catching as she read the words written in Evelyn's elegant script. "The fire will not destroy what is buried beneath the earth. The truth is hidden where the ashes cannot reach. The key is within the house. I will expose them all. It is only a matter of time." Enola's heart raced as she absorbed the words. Evelyn had known. She had uncovered everything, the truth about the Claremonts, the fire, and the dark secrets that had been hidden away for so long. But it wasn't just about the past, it was about the future, too. The truth had been buried beneath the earth, hidden away where the ashes of the fire couldn't touch it. And Enola was holding the key to it all. Chapter 11, The Key to the Past. Enola stared down at the silver locket in her hands, her mind racing as she processed Evelyn's final words. The fire will not destroy what is buried beneath the earth. The truth is hidden where the ashes cannot reach. The key is within the house. The locket, with its delicate engraving and hidden compartment, felt heavier now than it ever had before. Evelyn had left her a trail, one that led straight to the heart of the mystery. The key to everything, to the truth Evelyn had so desperately sought to expose, was hidden in the house. But where? The fire had destroyed so much of the Claremont estate, and the clues seemed scattered in 100 different directions. As Enola stood in the dim light of the forgotten house, surrounded by the remnants of a past that seemed determined to stay hidden, she knew she had only one choice: to follow Evelyn's trail to the very end. The locket was a symbol, an invitation, perhaps a clue that she couldn't afford to ignore. The small silver locket seemed almost alive in her palm, a piece of the past calling to her, urging her to dig deeper. The words Evelyn had written on the paper were clear: the truth is hidden where the ashes cannot reach. But what did that mean? What could possibly remain after a fire that had destroyed so much? Enola's thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a faint noise from outside the house, a branch snapping in the wind. She froze, her senses sharpening. Someone was out there. She had felt it before, that eerie feeling of being watched, and now it was more palpable than ever. She quickly tucked the locket and the letter into the folds of her coat, her eyes scanning the room for a place to hide. There was no time to waste. Whoever was approaching, Enola knew they were not friendly. She had learned that much from the mysterious figure at the Claremont estate. Her pulse quickened as she moved toward the window, peering through the dusty panes. The fog had thickened, but she could still make out a figure moving slowly across the garden, a tall, cloaked figure that seemed to blend into the mist. Enola held her breath, watching as the figure paused near the front of the house, their gaze sweeping over the building, as if looking for something or someone. Her heart raced. It was the same figure she had encountered before, the one who had threatened her at the Claremont estate. They were back, and this time, they weren't alone. Enola's instincts screamed at her to leave, to run, but she couldn't. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. The figure seemed to hesitate, as if sensing something was amiss. Then, with a soft whisper of movement, they disappeared into the fog, leaving Enola standing alone in the dark room. But she knew better than to let her guard down. She had to act quickly. The time for running was over. If she didn't uncover what had been hidden beneath the ashes, there would be no turning back. Enola took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The locket was the key, but it was also a symbol, a warning. The truth was waiting for her, but it was buried beneath layers of deception, lies, and threats. She had to uncover it all before it was too late. The sun was beginning to set as Enola left the house, her footsteps light as she moved back toward the village. She couldn't afford to be seen, but the need to know the truth was overwhelming. She had a plan. she had to return to the Claremont estate one last time, to the place where the fire had started, to the place where everything had begun. The estate stood in the distance, dark and silent, its once grand facade now just a shadow of what it had been. The garden, overgrown and wild, was no longer a symbol of beauty but a reminder of the destruction that had come for the Claremont family. As she approached the gate, Enola felt a surge of determination. She knew that the final answer lay within the ruins of the estate. Evelyn had hidden the truth here, in a place where no one could find it, where the ashes of the past would not reach. She slipped through the gate, moving carefully, her every step measured. The evening air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading light, the perfect cover for someone who needed to remain unseen. Enola made her way toward the back of the estate, to the spot where the fire had been the worst. The ground was still scorched in places, the remnants of what had once been the Claremonts' legacy now reduced to rubble. She knelt down, her hands brushing the earth as she searched for something, anything, that would give her the answers she sought. The ground felt cold under her fingers, but there was a slight warmth to it in some areas, a heat that hadn't quite faded. She dug deeper, her fingers working quickly, unearthing small fragments of burnt wood, shards of glass, and other remnants of the fire. And then, her fingers brushed against something solid, something metal. She gasped, pulling her hand back and wiping the dirt from her palm. There, buried beneath the ashes, was a small, rusted box. It was old, the metal tarnished by years of neglect, but it was unmistakably a box of importance. With trembling hands, Enola pulled the box from the ground, her heart racing. This was it. This was the hidden truth that Evelyn had been trying to uncover before she disappeared. Enola carefully unlatched the box, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, there were papers, documents, letters, and photographs, each one meticulously folded and preserved. Enola quickly scanned them, her fingers trembling as she read the words. The papers were old contracts, written in a fine, formal hand. They detailed a secret agreement between the Claremonts and several other influential families, including Theodore Vance. The agreement was tied to a series of financial transactions and land deals that had been hidden from the public. But there was more. The documents revealed a deeper, more sinister connection, one that tied the Claremonts to illegal dealings with corrupt officials, blackmail, and even murder. Evelyn had been about to expose all of it, and that's why she had been silenced. Enola's stomach churned as she pieced the puzzle together. The fire had been no accident. It had been orchestrated to destroy not only the Claremont estate but also the evidence of their dark dealings. Evelyn had uncovered the truth, and she had been killed because of it. But there was more. A final letter, written in a shaky hand, confirmed it all. They will come for me if I speak. But the truth must be known. I can't keep this to myself any longer. The fire will not destroy us all, someone must survive to tell the tale. I will leave this behind for whoever comes next. May they finish what I started. Enola closed her eyes, the weight of Evelyn's words sinking in. The truth was finally out. The Claremonts' empire of lies, their dark dealings with corrupt officials, and the price Evelyn had paid to uncover it was all here, in these papers. As Enola stood, holding the box close to her chest, she knew that her work was far from over. The danger was real, and the forces behind the Claremonts' secrets would stop at nothing to protect them. But she had the truth now. And she would not stop until it was brought to light. Chapter 12, The Truth in the Ashes. Enola stood alone in the overgrown garden, the rusted box clutched tightly in her hands. The papers inside had revealed the truth, the dark, twisted history of the Claremont family, their illicit dealings, and the high price Evelyn had paid to expose them. As she stood there, the weight of the discovery pressed down on her, but so did the knowledge that danger was still lurking in the shadows. The fire had not destroyed everything after all. It had only hidden the truth for a time. And now, with Evelyn's last words and the evidence in her hands, Enola was about to do what the Claremonts had feared most, bring the truth to light. But she wasn't naive. She knew that those responsible for this destruction would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. They had tried to intimidate her, to scare her away. But Enola wasn't one to back down. Not now. As she stood in the middle of the burned remnants of the Claremont estate, the fog swirling around her, she knew what had to be done. She couldn't leave Mornings Higher without ensuring that the truth was known, that Evelyn's death wasn't in vain, that the Claremont legacy of deceit would be exposed for all to see. But first, she had to go to the one person she trusted most, her brother, Sherlock. The journey back to the village was quiet, the fog thicker now, swirling in a dense blanket. As Enola approached Mrs. Brookshire's cottage, she could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her, the urgency of her task growing with every step. She had to act quickly before the mysterious figure, or anyone else who was involved, could silence her or take the evidence. She stepped inside the cottage and found Mrs. Brookshire sitting by the fire, knitting quietly. The older woman looked up as Enola entered, and for the first time, Enola saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Mrs. Brookshire knew what Enola had uncovered, and she could see the resolve in the younger woman's face. "You've found it, haven't you?" Mrs. Brookshire said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Enola nodded, walking over to the fireplace and sitting across from Mrs. Brookshire. She placed the box carefully on the table, the rusted lock gleaming in the firelight. "I have," Enola said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of what she had uncovered. "The truth. About the fire, about Evelyn, about the Claremonts and their dealings." Mrs. Brookshire's hands trembled as she reached for the box. "It's all there, isn't it? The things they tried to bury?" "It's all here," Enola confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "But it's not just about the fire. It's about the people who were behind it. The people who tried to cover up their crimes by destroying everything. Evelyn found it. She uncovered it all, and she paid the price." Mrs. Brookshire's eyes filled with sorrow, but also with something else, something Enola couldn't quite place. "I knew Evelyn. She was a bright young woman, so full of hope. But she couldn't escape the shadows of the family she was born into. No one could. Not even me." Enola watched her carefully. "You knew? You knew what was going on?" Mrs. Brookshire nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "I didn't know everything, but I knew enough. The Claremonts weren't just wealthy landowners. They were involved in things far worse. And Evelyn, she was starting to ask the right questions. Questions that no one in this village was ready to answer." "But they didn't just silence Evelyn," Enola said, her voice tight with frustration. "They destroyed the truth. They thought that the fire would bury everything." Mrs. Brookshire's face hardened. "They did, yes. But Evelyn, she didn't just go along with it. She knew something was wrong. She was going to expose them. And that's why she's dead now. Enola clenched her fists, her mind racing. I can't let this be buried. I can't let them get away with it. I have the proof, everything they've been hiding. But I need to make sure it gets into the right hands. Then you must go to London, Miss Holmes, Mrs. Brookshire said urgently, her voice filled with a sense of dread. Take the evidence to the authorities. They will listen to you. You must go now, before they find out you have it. Enola paused, the weight of her next decision hanging heavily in the air. She knew Mrs. Brookshire was right. The evidence had to be brought to those who could take action. She had done all she could in Morningshire. But she wasn't just going to take the papers to the authorities. She had another plan. I'm not going to just hand it over, Enola said quietly. I'm going to make sure it all comes to light. The world needs to know what the Claremonts were hiding, what Evelyn died trying to expose. And I will make sure the truth is known, no matter what it takes. Mrs. Brookshire's eyes flickered with a mixture of concern and admiration. Be careful, Miss Holmes. They will stop at nothing to protect themselves. They won't let you expose them without a fight. I know, Enola said, standing up. But the fight has already begun. As Enola prepared to leave the cottage, a sense of finality settled over her. She had uncovered the truth about the fire, the Claremonts, and Evelyn. She had the evidence, the key to everything, and she was determined to make sure it was known. The fog still hung thick over the village, the air cold as she stepped outside, her mind focused on the task ahead. She was going to London, and she wasn't going alone. Sherlock would be her ally in this. She needed his mind, his sharp intellect, to navigate the complexities of the Claremont family's web of lies. As she made her way toward the village square, Enola's thoughts were filled with a mix of determination and anticipation. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how much you tried to bury it. And now, with the truth finally in her hands, Enola was ready to bring it all to light. The fire had not destroyed the truth. It had only hidden it for a time. And now, Enola Holmes was ready to expose it for the world to see. Chapter 13, Into the Fire. Enola's resolve had never been stronger. The fog that blanketed Morningshire seemed to mirror the uncertainty in her heart, but she knew one thing for certain: the truth would be exposed, no matter the cost. She had the evidence, the documents, the letters, Evelyn's last words, and now she had to ensure they reached the right hands. Sherlock Holmes. Her brother. She needed him. With his brilliant mind, Sherlock was the perfect ally to help her navigate the labyrinth of deception that had plagued the Claremont family for years. The path ahead was perilous, but Enola was prepared to face whatever dangers came her way. She gathered her belongings, the weight of the evidence sitting heavily in her bag. The silver locket, the key, the papers, all of it pointed to a truth that was far darker than anything she could have imagined when she first arrived in Morningshire. The Claremonts had buried their secrets, but Enola had unearthed them. Now, she would bring those secrets to light, no matter how much power the Claremonts wielded. As she stepped outside, the village seemed quieter than ever. The streets were empty, the people going about their business as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The fire, the lies, Evelyn's sacrifice, it had all led to this moment. And Enola knew that the consequences of her actions would ripple through Mornings Higher, London, and beyond. She made her way through the fog to the small station at the edge of the village, where the train to London awaited. The journey ahead would take hours, and every moment counted. As she approached the station, she felt the weight of the silence around her. Someone was watching her. Enola glanced over her shoulder, but saw nothing. The feeling of being watched was too familiar by now. Someone was tracking her movements, someone who didn't want her to reach London, to expose the truth. She quickened her pace, her steps determined, the sound of her boots echoing in the fog. She had no time to waste. Whoever was following her would have to catch up if they could. When she reached the platform, she climbed aboard the train without looking back. The train car was mostly empty, the only other passengers a handful of tired-looking commuters. Enola found a seat near the window, staring out at the darkening landscape as the train began to move. The journey to London was long, but Enola's mind was consumed with the weight of what she had discovered. She thought of Evelyn, her bravery, her determination to uncover the truth even when it cost her everything. Enola had never known Evelyn, but she felt as though the young woman's spirit had guided her to this moment, urging her to keep pushing forward. As the train rumbled on through the mist, Enola couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The closer she got to London, the closer she was to the heart of the storm. She had made enemies along the way, and she knew that those enemies would stop at nothing to keep her from exposing the Claremont's secrets. The train's rhythmic clatter on the tracks seemed to lull her into a sense of calm, but deep down, she knew that calm wouldn't last. The closer she got to London, the more dangerous her journey would become. And yet, she felt an unshakable determination, a fire that burned inside her, pushing her forward. By the time the train pulled into London, the sun had long since set, and the streets were awash in the glow of gas lamps. Enola stepped off the train, her heart pounding, and took a deep breath of the cool night air. London was a city of secrets, of hidden truths buried beneath layers of smoke and mirrors. But Enola had learned to see through those illusions. She was ready to bring the truth to light. Her first stop was Baker Street. She knew that Sherlock was often out solving cases, but she also knew where to find him when the need arose. Sherlock was methodical, precise, and dispassionate, but Enola had always known that beneath his cool exterior, he cared for her in his own way. She needed him now more than ever. As she approached 221B, Baker Street, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. A shadow seemed to follow her, lingering just out of her line of sight. She turned the corner and saw the familiar door to Sherlock's office. She knocked twice, the sound echoing in the quiet street. The door opened almost immediately. Standing in the doorway was Sherlock Holmes, his sharp gaze locking onto her face. "Enola," he said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "I didn't expect you. What brings you to London?" Enola stepped past him, not waiting for an invitation. She didn't have time for pleasantries. "I need your help, Sherlock," she said, her voice firm. "I've uncovered something that must be brought to light. And I need your expertise." Sherlock closed the door behind her and led her to the sitting room. He gestured for her to take a seat, his brow furrowing slightly as he observed her with interest. "I'm listening." Enola placed the box she had taken from the Claremont estate onto the table, the weight of it tangible. I've uncovered the truth about the Claremont family and about Evelyn. They've been hiding a dark secret, one that's tied to their wealth, their power, and the fire that destroyed their estate. I need you to help me make sure this evidence reaches the right people. The truth cannot be allowed to stay buried any longer. Sherlock's gaze flickered to the box, his sharp eyes scanning the contents without touching anything. He didn't need to ask for details, he understood the gravity of the situation instantly. "What exactly are we dealing with?" he asked, his voice as calm as ever. The Claremonts were involved in illicit dealings, financial fraud, blackmail, and worse, Enola replied, her voice steady despite the intensity of the conversation. Evelyn had uncovered it all, but she was silenced before she could expose them. "This," she motioned to the box, "is the evidence she left behind. The truth she was willing to die for." Sherlock studied her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded. "Very well. I'll help you, Enola. We will make sure this reaches the proper authorities, and we'll make sure the truth is heard. But be prepared. If the Claremonts are involved in this, there will be repercussions." Enola met his gaze. "I know. But I'm ready. I can't let this be buried again." Sherlock's lips quirked up slightly, a rare sign of approval. "You always were stubborn." Enola smiled faintly. "I learned from the best." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sherlock used his connections to ensure that the evidence was delivered to the right people, people who could bring the Claremonts to justice. The documents, the letters, the photographs, they all pointed to the corruption and lies that had allowed the Claremonts to thrive. But now, they were exposed. Enola didn't stop, even when the danger escalated. She knew the risks. The shadowy figure who had followed her to Morning's Hire was still out there, and Enola was certain that they weren't the only ones who had been watching her. But the truth could not be buried any longer. Weeks later, the Claremont family's empire of lies began to crumble. The evidence Enola had uncovered had been enough to spark investigations, uncovering the dark dealings that had once been hidden behind layers of wealth and power. But Enola knew this was just the beginning. The truth was out, but there would always be more mysteries to solve. For now, though, she had one. The truth had come to light, and Evelyn's sacrifice had not been in vain. As Enola stood on the steps of 221B, Baker Street, watching the busy London street below, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had uncovered the truth, and she had done it on her own terms. And she knew, without a doubt, that more mysteries awaited her. Chapter 14, A New Beginning. The chill of autumn had settled over London, painting the city with hues of gold and amber. The streets were alive with the bustle of the season, as people hurried about their business, preparing for the coming winter. But for Enola, the world had shifted in ways she could not yet fully grasp. The Claremont case had come to a dramatic conclusion, but she knew it was only the beginning of something far larger than herself. She walked through the streets of London, the weight of her victory, and the events that had led up to it, heavy on her shoulders. Evelyn's truth had been exposed, the Claremont family's dark dealings unraveled, and the evidence she had uncovered was now in the hands of those who could take action. The truth was no longer buried beneath the ashes. It had been brought to light, just as Evelyn had hoped. Yet, as Enola walked, a strange feeling lingered. The world seemed quieter now, less urgent, as though the excitement of the mystery was slowly ebbing away. She had solved the case, exposed the truth, but she knew there was more. Always more. A restless energy bubbled beneath her surface, as if the world were full of untold stories, mysteries yet to be solved. Her path took her to the familiar building of 221B, Baker Street, where her brother Sherlock had been instrumental in helping her bring the truth about the Claremonts to light. The success of their collaboration, albeit a brief one, had been rewarding. And though Sherlock was still his enigmatic self, Enola had felt the rare satisfaction of working alongside him. Perhaps this was what she had been missing, someone who saw the world as she did, someone whose intellect matched her own, if not surpassed it. She paused before the door, taking a deep breath. It had become a habit now, knocking on Sherlock's door whenever she needed advice or companionship. But today, she wasn't just seeking guidance. She was ready for a new challenge. One that would test not only her skills as a detective but also her ability to navigate the shifting tides of the world around her. She knocked 3 times. Sherlock opened the door swiftly, as always, his sharp gaze assessing her before he spoke. "Enola, what brings you here? Another case, I assume?" Enola smiled, the familiar scent of tobacco and old books filling her senses. Sherlock's study had not changed in years, and the sight of it always brought a sense of comfort. "I've been thinking, Sherlock," she began, her voice steady. "I've uncovered the truth behind the Claremonts and their secrets. But there's so much more out there, isn't there? So many stories yet untold. So many cases that need solving." Sherlock raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Is that so?" Enola nodded, her hands clasped in front of her. "Yes. I've realized something. I'm not finished. The world is full of mysteries, and I want to be the one to solve them. I want to be more than just someone who stumbles upon a case. I want to make a difference. I want to bring justice to the stories that have been forgotten." Sherlock studied her for a long moment, his eyes piercing as always. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "You've always had a tendency to dive headfirst into trouble, Enola," he said with a faint smile. "But I suppose that's what makes you a good detective." Enola laughed softly. "I'm not afraid of a little trouble." Sherlock stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "If you're truly set on this course, then I see no reason to stand in your way. But know this, Enola. The world is full of dangers. And not every mystery is meant to be solved." Enola walked into the study, her heart racing with excitement. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready for whatever came her way. The Claremont case had taught her more than just how to uncover the truth. It had taught her about the power of persistence, the importance of questioning everything, and the necessity of staying true to herself, no matter what. "I'm ready for the next one," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever it may be." Sherlock smiled, a rare expression for him. "Then you'll have to make your own way, Enola. I'm not going to hold your hand forever." "I wouldn't want you to," Enola replied, her grin widening. As Enola turned to leave the study, her heart was light with anticipation. She had a new purpose now, a new mission. She wasn't just Sherlock's younger sister anymore. She was Enola Holmes, a detective in her own right. and the world was full of mysteries waiting to be solved. The following days were spent preparing. Enola moved through London with a new sense of confidence, gathering her resources and making connections with those who might need her help. She knew that Sherlock, though still supportive, would not always be by her side. He had his own cases, his own world to navigate. And so, she would forge her own path, one case at a time. But as she stepped into the bustling streets of London, she realized something else. She wasn't alone. She had friends, allies, people who believed in her abilities and were willing to support her. And most importantly, she had herself. Her first case came sooner than expected. A letter arrived, sealed in red wax, addressed to Enola Holmes. The case it outlined was complex and mysterious, one that immediately caught her attention. A missing person, a family with a dark secret, and a hidden treasure. As she read through the details, Enola's heart beat faster. This was the start of something new, something that would push her skills to their limits and challenge her like never before. But she was ready. She was ready to face whatever came next. She gathered her coat, prepared her tools, and set out into the London streets once more. The world was full of puzzles, and she was the one who would solve them. Chapter 15: The Uncharted Path. The streets of London stretched out before Enola, wide and full of possibilities. It was the kind of city that seemed to pulse with life, its hidden corners, its untold stories, and its mysteries waiting to be uncovered. She had solved her first major case, the truth about the Claremonts and Evelyn's tragic end, but now, with that chapter behind her, Enola knew there were more mysteries on the horizon. And she was ready for them. As she stood outside 221B, Baker Street, the place that had once felt so distant and now seemed almost like home, Enola took a deep breath. The city before her was alive with possibilities. The letter she had received, sealed with red wax and marked with an unfamiliar crest, was still tucked safely in her coat pocket. It was an invitation, a call to adventure, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. She had learned so much in her short time as a detective. She had learned that the world wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. It was full of hidden truths, of shadows, of untold stories that were just waiting for someone with the courage to uncover them. She had learned that justice wasn't always as simple as it appeared, and that truth was often buried beneath layers of lies and deceit. But more than anything, she had learned that she wasn't alone. She had her mind, her spirit, and her courage, and she had the city around her, full of people and stories waiting to be discovered. Enola couldn't ignore the pull. The world was wide, and there were so many mysteries to uncover. There was so much more to learn, so many lives to touch, so many injustices to right. She wasn't just Sherlock Holmes's younger sister anymore. She was Enola Holmes, a detective in her own right, with her own voice and her own path to carve. With that thought in mind, she headed toward the unknown, her heart full of determination. The letter had led her to a small estate on the outskirts of London, owned by the Wilford family, whose son had gone missing under suspicious circumstances. His disappearance was the kind of case that could only be solved by someone who wasn't afraid to dig into uncomfortable truths. And Enola wasn't afraid. The estate loomed before her, elegant yet oppressive, with ivy crawling up its walls like a dark secret waiting to be exposed. As she stepped through the gate, Enola felt that familiar thrill of anticipation. Another puzzle to solve, another mystery to unravel. The Wilford family was hiding something. She could feel it in the air. But as Enola walked toward the door, her resolve hardened. She had done this before, faced danger before, and she would do it again. She would uncover the truth, no matter how many walls were built to keep it hidden, no matter who tried to stop her. Because Enola Holmes was no longer a mere spectator in this world of shadows. She was an active participant, a force for change, a detective who would uncover the truth, no matter where it led her. She reached for the doorbell, her fingers steady, her mind clear. There was no turning back now. As the door opened, Enola felt the weight of the moment. She wasn't just knocking on a door, she was opening the next chapter in her journey as a detective. The cases, the people, the mysteries, this was her life now. And it was only just beginning. Don't miss the next thrilling case in the Enola Holmes series. The mysteries are just beginning, and Enola needs you by her side.